First of all, I'm John, no joke, that's my name, and to make matters worse, I weigh 275 pounds and am 6 feet 5, so everyone nicknames me Big John, like that Jimmy Dean country song from the early 60s. Though I don't work in the mines, I do spend my days constructing houses, so I've acquired strong muscles from lifting timber and nailing things together. I could have probably handled the imaginary John, but it would have been close. No, we don't use air hammers because my boss takes pride in our work, assuring each customer that every joint is made like we were going to live in it ourselves. He likes to brag that our fingers have handled each and every nail in the house. Does it make the house better? Crap! I don't know. I do know people line up to have their houses built by us, and that keeps money in my pocket for the high-priced crap. Julie, that's my wife, loves to show off to her friends. One final point about me that may help you understand later events. I've never been beaten at arm wrestling, and I've won a lot of money from fools who thought their grip was stronger than mine. Let me now tell you about Julie, who has been my lifelong companion since we first met 20 years ago. I was lost when I saw the small blonde girl for the first time. I started a campaign to persuade her to say I do, knowing that I had to have her. Trouble was, she hung around with the in crowd, the football jocks whose parents kept them in a new car every couple years and supplied cash for them to take their dates to expensive places like clubbing over in Savannah. Now, before you pipe up about them not being able to get into a club younger than 18, grow up, get a life. When senator or legislator boys show up, the guy checking IDs don't see so good. From the best they can tell, every boy and girl in that party is well over 18. Anyway, Julie's main squeeze was one Stan Grubbs, better known around campus as Meat. If I have to explain why he was called Meat, you're too young to be reading this account of my life anyway, so close up and go back to playing ball. Like I said, Julie seemed completely awed by Stan, and I wouldn't have bet a plug nickel I'd ever have a chance with her. I didn't either until she had finished college and returned home to find only us working-class nerds still around. I vividly recall my initial encounter with her in Tony's pharmacy. She had recently graduated and started working at our neighborhood bank as an assistant manager. During her half-day off, she had stopped by Tony's, where there was still a soda fountain, to get a milkshake. "Let me get that, Julie." I handed the clerk enough to cover both our shakes. She clearly had trouble remembering me. "Who? No, don't tell me I never forget a face." She followed me back to a booth, apparently still trying to place me. "I know you were in my class, and judging from your size, you must have played football. But I just can't. Don't worry about it. We never traveled in the same circles. And no, I didn't play football. Too busy studying at night and working after school to help Mom with the bills." "John! John Turner! Is it really you?" Her face lit up like she was really glad to see me. "You won't believe this, but up until our junior year, I had the biggest crush on you. Of course, at that age, I didn't dare let on, and besides, you hardly paid any attention to little old me." I didn't know what to say. I just stared at this Nicole Kidman look-alike, confessing she was once interested in me. I couldn't believe it. But seeing her ring finger bare, I wasn't dumb enough to miss this chance now. Maybe I could take you to the dance at the American Legion hut next Friday night. I thought I'd fall off the bench when she accepted. From that first dance, we were inseparable. And 9 months later, I married the most beautiful girl in the state. No, make that the nation, at least in my eyes. Our new home was situated just beyond the town boundaries, sandwiched between 10 acres of heavily forested terrain and accessible only by driving across what appeared to be a wagon track from SC 61. You wouldn't imagine a house existed back there if you didn't know it was there. Salespeople never disturbed us, and our 2 children and their dogs could run around freely without any worries at all. The only danger would be snakes, and as long as the German pointer was with them, no snake had better show his hide. Any other varmint, either 2- or 4-legged, would find himself on the business end of a pair of pearly, sharp teeth belonging to Bruno, our black lab Rottweiler cross that would protect the kids with his life. Yes, sir! I had it all. A wife I dearly loved, and who was crazy about me. A couple of kids anyone could be proud of. Between the 2 of us, money was no problem. And the one thing I had worried about when we first married, I'd finally been able to forget about. Yeah, I know I got you wondering, so I won't try to hide it any longer. You see, that old saw about telling how much a man's packing by looking at the size of his hands and feet is a bunch of shit. As I told you, I'm a big man, bigger than the usual guy, but my package is just normal. A shade over 6 inches with a glans of about 1.5 inches across. I haven't seen many others since I wasn't a jock or in service, but from what I could read, I was just about average, maybe a little over, but not much. For the first few years of our marriage, I'd concerned about how I measured up, so to speak, since I knew Julie had dated a guy named Meat. She did her best, of course, to reassure me that I truly knew how to use the gifts God had given me, and I did read a lot of material on the subject of pleasing women. It's true that she has enjoyed practically every time we have shared a kiss. If not, she was a superior actress to Ms. Kidman, with whom she had a striking resemblance. Okay, now you know I'm a big rugged guy, but I'm also kind-hearted to a fault. I have gotten into the habit of letting Julie have just about anything she wanted, and if I happened to say no to some request, her tears always changed my mind. I couldn't stand seeing a woman cry. I guess that came from all the times I saw Mama crying. I'm obviously also an idiot when it comes to recognizing real love. I never had the slightest inkling Julie was unsatisfied with our life. Not until that fateful night back in 2011. As usual, I intended to go out to Nick's bar with my buddies, where we'd spend the hours between knocking off time and midnight drinking beer, playing pool, and just shooting the shit in general. That's what I planned to do, that's what Julie expected me to do, but it wasn't what I did. Instead, I got to think about that sweet woman I had waiting at home. And after only a little better than an hour, it was just getting dark. I told the gang bye and headed home. Now, I've already told you about the road leading to the front of our house, but I didn't mention the back road, the one that led by the barn and stables. It wasn't any better, but I usually took it so I could stop by and make sure the animals were taken care of. Since the kids were at the Grands for the weekend, I didn't know if Julie would remember. I need not have worried, my little sweetheart had everything under control, so I parked at the barn and walked on to the house. Julie always gets sore if I track dirt through the house, so we have a bench on the back porch where I take off my work boots and grab the bedroom slippers that were always waiting there for me. It was an early autumn night and Julie had the windows up trying to save on air conditioning cost, so the only thing separating me from our den was 10 feet of space and a screen wire. I could see what was happening in the den just as well as if I'd been sitting inside, but since I was sitting in the dark, no one inside could see me. I hadn't really looked inside until I heard a man's voice say, "You sure your husband isn't coming home anytime soon?" "Relax," Julie answered. "John won't be back until Nick's closes at midnight. Until then, we have the place to ourselves, and I'm yours to do with as you please." With those words, my world ended. Now some would think I'm a wimp, or maybe crazy, and I won't argue either. But something I can't explain got a hold of me, and I found myself acting in a way I never dreamed I'd act. Like I said before, I'd read stories on Elite about husbands who watched their wives and got a kick out of it. But I never thought I'd be one of those. Well, I'm not exactly one of them. Usually those husbands get excited and jack off as they watch. All I did was silently cry like a baby as I watched my world go down the drain. Sure, I could have burst in and kicked Stan's ass and maybe beat up on Julie a bit, but to what end? This was her old flame, who was back in our lives, and I knew if I stopped it now, they'd just do it at another time in another place. And that'd probably be a place where I couldn't get the cell phone pictures I'd need in the divorce. Julie and Stan were sitting on the sofa facing me, so I had a perfect view as they kissed. I got some great shots of him getting intimate with my wife, and I can see the big one that gave him the nickname Meat. Really, I don't know how else to describe it. That bitch, I thought, she always refused to give me VJ. Said it was nasty. I continued to watch and snap pictures of the act. "Baby, you got me so hot I just gotta plant this thing as deep as I can get it," he said. I managed to get a few good snapshots of it at various positions. At that point, I figured I had enough pictures and was about to leave them to their pleasures when Stan made the fatal mistake. Like many men, he just couldn't keep his mouth shut and accept what had been offered. Instead, he had to brag a bit. "You said mine was the best rod you ever had, did you mean it?" "Yeah, baby, I meant every word. That thing reaches places that haven't been experienced anything since high school." I could tell by his expression those words pleased him. "What about Big John? His isn't as big as mine." "Honey, not even close. Don't get me wrong, he does a good job, but there's a big difference between riding in a Volkswagen and a Corvette compared to you and him." Julie got hold of a towel that she must have brought in earlier and gave herself a quick wash. "You still good for round two?" They started again. I was surprised that Julie went along with him when he started trash talking about me and how I wasn't man enough to keep my woman. Rather than defend me, or at least not join in the insults, she started such BS as, "No, baby, my little wimpy husband can't measure like you." I could go into other remarks, but by that time I was seeing red, and I'm sure you can imagine the kind of crap I'm talking about. I finally had enough. I considered what to do, and all of a sudden, it came to me. At last, things were going my way. I managed to slip up directly behind Stan without either noticing me. His nuts had a fascinating rhythm, swinging to and fro. Just as she finished, Stan spoke. "Here it comes, baby. Maybe you can get hubby to clean you when he gets home." "Good idea," she replied. "I leave it just like you. Hell, I'll bet he'll be so drunk he'll probably not know the difference." At that time, my right hand was almost around that dangling nut sack, and my left hand was only inches from his thick head of hair. He was one of those men who like to strut around wearing their hair in a ponytail. "What you want to bet, baby?" I said, grasping his nuts and jerking his head back at the same time. The results were amazing. With a scream, Stan just passed out as I continued to squeeze and twist while pulling his head back as hard as I could. Julie jumped up, tried to cover herself, and pleaded, "Please don't hurt us, John. This ain't what it looks like." "Well, what the hell is it, Julie? It looks like the woman I was sure I'd spend the rest of my life with is screwing her old boyfriend behind my back. What do you have to say to that?" By now she was sobbing. You weren't supposed to find out." "Yeah, but I did, you damn witch." By now I'm sure Stan wasn't feeling a thing. So I dropped my hold on him and started toward Julie. I was almost to her when I noticed she was staring at my hand. That was the first time I realized I'd brought a fist full of his hair with me. I must have looks like an Apache warrior holding a freshly taken scalp. I threw it aside and reached for my wife. Her scream was one of pure terror, but she was too scared to run, as if she could have escaped anyway. I grabbed her, plopped down in my easy boy, and pulling her across my lap. I should have done long ago now that I thought about it, because there had been lots of little signs that she was cheating. I was just a stupid husband in love and refused to believe my own eyes. Well, they say hindsight is 20/20, so who am I to argue? Love covers a multitude of sins, so I really didn't hurt her very much. When I thought she had enough, I dropped her on the floor, kicking her clothes toward her. "Better get dressed, bitch. You need to take your friend to the ER." She complied without one word of backtalk, except to ask if I wasn't going to dress her lover before loading him in the car for her. "Nope. He got himself without the help of this wimp, so he can get unnaked without it also." He cried as I dumped his ass in the backseat of her car. I must admit, I just couldn't resist the temptation to give his balls just one more squeeze, causing him to pass out again. I doubt he felt the bumps on the drive to the hospital. When Julie got in the car, he still wasn't making a sound. "Your stuff will be on the porch when you get back." "John, can't we get around this?" Tears were running down her cheeks. This really meant nothing to me. It was just no string-attached thing. I remained quiet. It may have been just a no-string-attached thing to her, and we might have been able to work something out if she hadn't bad-mouthed me while she was sleeping with her lover boy. But she did, and I'd be hearing those words echoing in my mind for years. She looked so lost I almost gave in, but like I read in the Reddit stories, any man who did that was a spineless wimp, and that just wasn't me. "No, sir!" "Not this boy." I'm sure she expected me to relent because of what she hit me with next. But I don't have anywhere to go. She was bawling so hard it was hard to make out her words. Still, I stood as firm as Stonewall Jackson. She had one last card to play, and she did it while lover lay in the back seat. "If you forgive me, I'll testify that he fell and hurt himself when your trial comes up." "Trial?" "What trial?" "I caught him with my wife." "There ain't gonna be no trial." He got what he deserved, plain and simple. I turned my back on the woman I thought I'd spend my life with. I was still stewing when I heard her fire the engine up and drive out of my life. That's the last I'll see of her, I thought, as the wisp of tires on asphalt faded into the distance. I felt very proud of myself, but nobody was ever going to call me a wimp. When I awoke next morning, her things were gone from the porch, and I was all set to begin my new life, with my first task being to find a trustworthy wife, after the divorce, of course. I can't stand to even think about it, but I feel I'd be cheating my readers if I didn't at least sum up the story. It seems that her claim that she had nowhere to stay was untrue. 2 of the largest police officers you've ever seen arrived up at my door the following day. I was hauled off to the pokey. I discovered Julie had cleared out our joint account months prior when I was attempting to post bail. I had just enough money left over for household expenditures because my new address was the jailhouse, so I wasn't really in need of anything. With no resources, I was at the mercy of the public defender, a pimply-faced kid who probably had never seen the inside of a courtroom. Long story short, after the DA finished telling me about how mean old me had ruined my completely innocent wife and her old schoolmate, that just happened to drop by, I was lucky I only got 3 years. Reduced to probation if I signed the house and land over to Julie. It would have been a lot worse than that if I hadn't had the pictures, which the judge wouldn't allow the jury to see, but which I'm sure affected his decision on the punishment. I had to consider it a while, but finally agreed. Why, you ask? Well, I thought of Bubba and his friends waiting for the guards to turn the lights out. Now, don't get me wrong, one Bubba I could handle, but in there, Bubbas don't come in ones. So now I rent a place on the lake. It ain't much, but I fixed it up real good. On my dime, of course. It's a roof over our heads when I pick up the kids for my weekends. And since my folks and my in-laws took my side, I still get a good home-cooked meal pretty often. Yes, I still find the LW area of lit to be enjoyable now, but I don't take too seriously the remarks that say I would have done so and so. I can attest from personal experience that you just can't do that shit in today's world. What's your opinion about OP? Thanks for joining us in our stories where revenge is served hot. Please consider subscribing to our channel to ensure your next chef remains loyal. Tune in for the next one to get your revenge appetite fulfilled. If you're below 18, hold on, it's not for the faint-hearted.